May 10th, 1796. The Adda River, near the town of Lodi. The bridge is 200 paces long, built of wood, and it is the only way across. On the far bank, Austrian gunners under General Karl Sebottendorf have their cannon trained directly down its length, and for a French soldier the bridge at Lodi is, for the length of a single crossing, the most lethal place in Europe. The French infantry hesitate at the near end. Grape shot has already cut the first attempt to pieces, and then a slight, gray-eyed brigadier general, 26 years old, already commanding more authority than his rank should allow, moves down to the column himself. He orders the charge. He sends his grenadiers forward into the smoke, and he goes forward with them into the range of guns that have already killed the men who tried this crossing once. By nightfall, the bridge belongs to France. By morning, the soldiers who watched him under that fire have started calling him something new. Welcome to Portraits of the Past, where we explore the lives of those whose legacies continue to echo through time. In the spring of 1796, the French Republic was a nation that had executed its king, survived a terror that consumed thousands of its own citizens, and was now governed by a five-man directory that was corrupt, chronically insolvent, and at war on every frontier it possessed. The main effort against the First Coalition, the alliance of Austria, Britain, and the smaller German states arrayed against revolutionary France, was meant to fall on the Rhine, where France's most senior and trusted generals commanded large, well-supplied armies. Italy was the secondary theater, assigned almost as an afterthought to a force the Directory had neither the money nor the inclination to properly equip. Command of that secondary army went in March of 1796 to a junior general whose chief qualifications, in the eyes of several directors, were that he had recently helped suppress a royalist uprising in the streets of Paris, that he had married well into a politically useful circle, and that sending him to Italy would remove an ambitious young soldier from a capital that already had more ambitious soldiers than it needed. The army Napoleon found waiting for him in Nice was not the instrument of legend. It numbered perhaps 38,000 men, and it had not been paid in months. Boots were rotting off marching feet. Bread was scarce enough that requisition had become indistinguishable from foraging. Some of his generals, older men, veterans of campaigns Napoleon had only studied from books, received their new commander with open contempt. A Corsican upstart sent to lead soldiers who had survived worse winters than this one without his help. What Napoleon offered them in his first days of command has become one of the most quoted speeches in military history. A promise that he would lead them into the richest plains in the world, where honor and glory awaited. The line is genuinely stirring, and it appears in countless popular accounts as something he said to his assembled army at the outset of the campaign. The documented evidence for that is thin. The wording survives chiefly through Napoleon's own later dictation at St. Helena, composed decades after the fact by a man constructing the legend of himself, and historians today generally treat it less as a transcript than as a retrospective polish on an army's mood that was, by every contemporary account, considerably more desperate than inspired. What is documented is simpler and almost as remarkable. Within weeks, This same starving, half-mutinous force was marching and fighting with a cohesion no one watching from Paris had thought possible. The campaign opened on April 12th at Montenotte, where Napoleon struck the seam between two allied armies, Austrian forces under General Beaulieu to the east, Piedmontese forces under General Colli to the west, before they could combine. It was a deliberate, calculated wedge, and it worked. Millesimo and Dago followed within days. By April 21st at Mondovì, the army of the Kingdom of Sardinia had been broken badly enough that its king sued for terms. The armistice of Carrasco, signed a week later, took Piedmont out of the war entirely and opened the road into Lombardy. What is most striking about this opening sequence is its velocity. Napoleon's officers wrote home again and again about a tempo of operations that gave the Austrians no interval in which to recover, regroup, or even fully understand what had happened to them. He read terrain the way other commanders read dispatches, instantly, and with an instinct for the single weak point that would unmake an entire enemy disposition. This was the same habit of mind visible in embryo at Toulon, now operating across an entire theater of war. Lodi, 2 weeks later, gave the army its myth. It did not, in strict military terms, give Napoleon the decisive victory popular memory often assigns it. Beaulieu's main Austrian force had already begun a structured withdrawal before the crossing, and the action at the bridge, however genuinely dangerous, did not destroy the army it was fighting. What it did was something arguably more valuable to a young general who understood, even this early, that political power and battlefield reputation were the same currency. Soldiers do not follow paperwork. They follow a man who crossed the bridge beside them. Milan opened its gates within days, and the nickname born on that bridge, the one his own grenadiers are said to have given him, followed him for the rest of his career. The harder war was still ahead at Mantua. The Austrian fortress city, ringed by marshland and defended by a substantial garrison, became the campaign's center of gravity for the next 8 months. A siege that would demand more of his exhausted army than any single battle had so far. Austria sent army after army through the Alpine passes to break it, and Napoleon broke them in turn. Wormser's first relief attempt was crushed at Lonato and Castiglione in early August. His second came apart at Bassano in September, and the general who had marched south to save Mantua found himself driven back inside its walls, besieged within his own siege. By November it was Alvinci's turn, and the fighting at Arcole ran for 3 brutal days across flooded ground and a single contested bridge. Napoleon himself reportedly pulled half-drowned from a marsh in the chaos before his soldiers held the line. In January, Alvinci tried once more, and at Rivoli, Napoleon's reading of converging Austrian columns produced what military historians still study as a textbook demonstration of operational deception, using interior lines to meet and break forces that believed they had him trapped. Mantua surrendered on February 2, 1797. 4 Austrian armies, sent across 10 months to lift the siege, had been destroyed one at a time. While his soldiers fought, Napoleon governed. He negotiated directly with the Papal States, and the Treaty of Tolentino, signed in February 1797, extracted territory, a substantial indemnity, and a stream of paintings, sculptures, and manuscripts that began flowing north to Paris under armed escort. He established new political entities across northern Italy. The Cispadane Republic, then the Cisalpine, exercising a degree of independent statecraft no field commander had been authorized to wield. And when the ancient neutral Republic of Venice gave him a pretext, he ended it outright in the spring of 1797, partitioning a republic that had governed itself for more than 1,000 years in negotiations he conducted with Austria almost entirely on his own initiative. That initiative produced, in October 1797, the Treaty of Campo Formio, terms Napoleon negotiated directly with the Austrian envoy, Count Cobenzl, substantially exceeding his instructions from Paris, trading Venetian territory to Austria in exchange for recognition of French gains along the Rhine and in northern Italy. The Directory, presented with a finished piece rather than a draft for approval, accepted it. They had little choice. The general they had sent to Italy to keep out of the way had returned the most decisive military success of the Revolutionary Wars, an enormous infusion of Italian gold and art that propped up a bankrupt government, and a fait accompli they lacked the authority and arguably the nerve to unwind. The chronology of the Italian campaign, Montenotte through Carrasco, Lodi, the long siege of Mantua, Arcole, Rivoli, Tolentino, Campo Formio, is among the most thoroughly documented sequences in Napoleon's career, traceable through his own dispatches, the orders of his marshals, and Austrian after-action reports. The army's deprivation at the campaign's outset is equally well attested, independent of Napoleon's own later framing of it. What remains genuinely contested is how much of the campaign's popular image was built afterward rather than lived in real time. The rousing proclamation to his troops, the precise battlefield drama at Lodi, even some details of the near drowning at Arcole survive substantially through accounts Napoleon himself shaped. At St. Helena, in his bulletins, in propaganda he commissioned during the campaign itself, including paintings and engravings produced before the fighting had even concluded. Historians generally accept the documented outcomes while treating the more cinematic details of how those outcomes were achieved with appropriate caution. The campaign's true sustaining mechanism, meanwhile, is less mythologized than it deserves to be. An army funded almost entirely through requisition, indemnity, and plunder, fighting under a commander who understood with total clarity that momentum itself was a form of supply, that an army moving fast enough and winning often enough did not need Paris to feed it. Italy is the campaign where Napoleon discovered something the Directory had not intended to teach him, that a general victorious enough and fast enough could negotiate peace treaties, dismantle ancient republics, and fund a government's treasury without waiting for that government's permission. He returned to Paris in December 1797, not as a servant of the Directory, but as something closer to its creditor. Whether that was the moment the soldier began to become the statesman, or whether the statesman had been waiting inside the soldier all along, is a question the next chapter of his life will not so much answer as deepen. The paint is dry on this chapter, but the archives are vast. Subscribe and return to Portraits of the Past. The next exhibit awaits.